The bullet shattered the general store window just as Kestrel Hawthorne stepped onto the boardwalk, her 6-month-old son Jasper crying in her arms. Glass exploded around them, and she instinctively ducked, clutching the baby tighter as chaos erupted in the dusty street of Copper Ridge. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw him, a man with half his face carved by old scars, diving toward her with surprising grace despite his weathered appearance. "Get down," Maverick Kane shouted, his voice rough as gravel, throwing his body over hers as another shot rang out. The warmth of his chest pressed against her back, and she could smell leather and sage on his clothes. His scarred hands, surprisingly gentle, helped her to her feet once the shooting stopped. "You're bleeding," Kestrel whispered, noticing the crimson stains spreading across his shirt sleeve. But Maverick was already scanning the street, his steel-gray eyes searching for threats. The townspeople who had been going about their business moments before now stood frozen, staring at the unlikely pair with a mixture of fear and disgust. "The widow Hawthorne and the Devil's Rider," someone hissed from the crowd. "Look how quick she took to him." Kestrel's cheeks burned with humiliation. It had been only 3 months since her husband's death, and the town had already branded her a pariah for refusing to sell her land to the railroad company. Now, being seen with Maverick, a man whose reputation for violence preceded him wherever he went, would only fuel their hatred. "Pay them no mind," Maverick said quietly, his scarred fingers briefly touching her elbow. "Let me walk you home." As they moved through the hostile crowd, Kestrel noticed how Maverick's presence seemed to create a bubble of space around them. Men stepped aside, women pulled their children closer, and whispers followed in their wake like poisonous smoke. She had heard the stories how he had ridden with outlaws, how his face had been carved up in a knife fight, how he had killed 7 men in a single night. But the man beside her, carefully adjusting his pace to match hers, seemed more protective. "Than dangerous? Why did you help me?" she asked as they reached the edge of town, where her small cabin stood isolated against the backdrop of rolling hills. Maverick paused, his hand resting on the gatepost. "Because you didn't flinch when you saw my face." His voice carried a weight of old pain. "And because a woman with a baby shouldn't have to face bullets alone." Inside the cabin, Kestrel tended to his wound, while Jasper slept in his cradle. Maverick sat still as stone, but she could feel the tension in his muscles as she cleaned the graze on his arm. His scars, she noticed, were old white lines that spoke of survival rather than cruelty. "The town thinks I'm cursed," she said softly, wrapping clean cloth around his arm. "My husband died in a mining accident, and now the railroad wants my land. They say I bring bad luck to anyone who gets close. Maverick's good. I met hers, and she saw something flicker. Their understanding, perhaps, or recognition." "Maybe we're both cursed then," he said. "But curses have a way of breaking when the right people find each other." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of angry voices from town. Whatever had started today, Kestrel knew it was far from over. The lynch mob arrived at dawn, their torches casting dancing shadows against the cabin walls. Kestrel woke to the sound of boots on her porch and men's voices raised in righteous fury. Through the window, she could see at least 20 townspeople. Led by Railroad Baron Cornelius Blackwater and Sheriff Donovan Cree, both men she had refused to sell her land to. "Come out, Widow Hawthorne," Blackwater's voice boomed. "We know the killer's in there with you." Kestrel's heart hammered as she clutched Jasper to her chest. In the corner, Maverick was already reaching for his gun belt, his movements fluid and deadly despite having spent the night in her chair watching over them. "There's too many," she whispered, but Maverick's scarred face showed no fear, only cold calculation. "Back door?" he asked quietly. "Boarded up after the last storm." The front door shuddered under heavy fists. "We know you're harboring a murderer," Sheriff Cree shouted. "That devil killed 3 men in Tombstone last month." "That's a lie," Maverick said, his voice barely audible. "I was in Mexico last month running horses." But his explanation wouldn't matter to the mob outside. They had already decided his guilt. Kestrel made a decision that would change everything. She opened the door before Maverick could stop her, stepping onto the porch with Jasper in her arms, placing herself between the mob and the man who had saved her life. "He's under my protection," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "Despite her trembling hands, any man who wants him will have to go through me first." The crowd's reaction was immediate and violent. Shouts of horror and "murderer's woman" filled the air. Blackwater's face twisted with rage. He had expected her to hand over Maverick without a fight, clearing the way for him to claim her land when she inevitably fled town. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Hawthorne," Blackwater said, his voice silky with false concern. "This man will bring nothing but death to your door." "You already saved my life once," Kestrel replied, surprised by her own boldness. "Which is more than this town has done since my husband died." Behind her, she felt Maverick's presence like a wall of strength. He hadn't drawn his weapon, but his hand rested on his gun, ready to defend her and the baby if necessary. The crowd sensed it, too, the coiled danger in his stillness. "Give us the killer, and we'll leave you in peace," Sheriff Cree offered, but his eyes were cold as winter stone. "No," Kestrel said simply. The standoff stretched like a taut wire. Some of the townspeople began to shuffle nervously, remembering stories of Maverick's lightning-fast draw. Others, emboldened by their numbers, pressed closer to the porch. That's when Maverick stepped forward, his scarred face visible in the morning light. "I'll make you a deal," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had faced death countless times. "Let the woman and child go about their business, and I'll answer for whatever crimes you think I've committed. But no, this I won't go quietly, and some of you won't be going home to your families." The threat hung in the air like gunpowder. Smoke. Blackwater's face reddened, but before he could respond, Kestrel spoke again. "We stand together," she said, reaching back to take Maverick's hand. The touch sent shockwaves through both of them, manned through the crowd, who saw the gesture as confirmation of their worst suspicions. "So be it," Blackwater snarled. "You've made your choice, widow. Don't come crying to us when he shows his true colors." As the mob reluctantly dispersed, Kestrel felt Maverick's scarred fingers squeeze hers gently. They had drawn a line in the sand, and there would be no crossing back. The town's wrath would follow them now, but somehow, facing it together felt less frightening than facing it alone. The attacks began subtly at first. Kestrel's chickens were found dead in their coop, their necks twisted. Ouch. Her vegetable garden was trampled in the night. The general store refused to sell her supplies, and the doctor would no longer treat baby Jasper when he developed a fever. But Maverick proved to be more than just a gunfighter. He was a man of surprising skills and gentle nature. "Fever's breaking," he said softly, placing a cool cloth on Jasper's forehead. His scarred hands moved with practiced ease as he prepared a medicinal tea from wild herbs he had gathered in the hills. "My grandmother was Cherokee. She taught me the old ways of healing." Kestrel watched in amazement as this dangerous man, feared by an entire town, sang lullabies to her baby in a language she didn't recognize. The contrast between his fearsome reputation and his tender actions with Jasper created a confusing ache. In her chest, something she hadn't felt since her husband's death. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one evening, as they sat by the fire, Jasper sleeping peacefully in Maverick's arms. "You could leave. Find another town where they don't know your name." "Maverick's good." I studied her face in the firelight. Could you leave your husband's grave, your home, everything you've built here?" "That's different. I have nowhere else to go." "Neither do I," he said simply. "Not anymore." The next morning brought fresh horrors. Kestrel woke to find a dead rattlesnake nailed to her door with a note. "Leave town or join your husband." And what made her blood run cold was the sight of Maverick's horse, Tempest, lying motionless in the corral, foam around his mouth. "Poison," Maverick said, his voice deadly quiet as he knelt beside the magnificent black stallion. His hands trembled as he closed the animal's eyes. The first time Kestrel had seen him show vulnerability. "I'm sorry," she whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know he meant everything to you. He was the only friend I had before. ... Maverick's voice broke off, but she understood. Before her, before Jasper, before this strange new family they had accidentally created. That afternoon, as Kestrel hung laundry behind the cabin, she heard riders approaching. Through the sheets flapping in the wind, she saw 6 men in long dusters, their faces hidden by hat brims. These weren't townspeople, they moved with the fluid grace of professional killers. "Maverick," she called out, but he was already there, appearing at her side with that uncanny ability he had of sensing danger. "Bounty hunters," he said grimly, recognizing their type. Blackwater must have put a price on my head. The lead rider, a tall man with silver hair and cruel eyes, called out, "Maverick Kane, you're wanted for murder in 3 territories. Come, peaceful, and the woman and child won't be harmed." "And if I don't?" Maverick asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we take you anyway, and they pay for harboring a fugitive." Kestrel felt the world tilting beneath her feet. In trying to protect Maverick, she had put Jasper in mortal danger. But before she could speak, Maverick stepped forward, his hands raised. "I'll come," he said, "but I want your word." "No." Kestrel grabbed his arm, desperate strength flooding through her. "You saved my life. You healed my son. You've shown me more kindness than anyone in this godforsaken town. I won't let them take you." Maverick turned to her, his scarred face soft with wonder. "Kestrel, you don't understand. I've done things." "Don't care what you've done," she said fiercely. "I care about who you are, and you're not leaving us." The silver-haired bounty hunter laughed coldly. "How touching. But dead or alive, he's coming with us." As the men began to spread out, surrounding the cabin, Kestrel realized that their moment of peace had been nothing more than the calm before the storm. The real battle was just beginning. The gunfight erupted like thunder on a clear day. Maverick moved with deadly precision, his weapon appearing in his hand as if by magic. The first bounty hunter fell before he could clear leather, but the others scattered for cover, turning Kestrel's peaceful homestead into a battlefield. "Get to the root cellar," Maverick shouted, diving behind the water trough as bullets splintered the wood around him. Kestrel had already made her decision. Instead of fleeing, she ran to the cabin and emerged with her late husband's rifle, a weapon she had learned to use during the harsh frontier winters. The silver-haired leader had taken position behind the barn, methodically firing at Maverick's position. He didn't see Kestrel circling wide through the tall grass, her heart pounding but her aim steady. When she pulled the trigger, the shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around with a curse of surprise. "Behind you," she called to Maverick, who pivoted instantly to face 2 hunters trying to flank him. His gun spoke twice, and both men crumpled. But the victory was short-lived. More riders were approaching from the direction of town. "It's a trap," Maverick realized, his scarred face grim. "They herded us into this." Sheriff Cree led the new arrivals, along with Blackwater and a dozen armed men. They had planned this carefully, used the bounty hunters to flush out their quarry, then finish the job themselves. But they hadn't counted on Kestrel's fierce loyalty or her deadly aim. "Surrender now, and we'll make it quick," Blackwater called out, his voice thick with satisfaction. "You're outnumbered 10-1. That's when the unexpected happened." Henrik Volkov, the Russian immigrant who owned the neighboring spread, appeared on the ridge with his sons. The grizzled rancher had always been an outsider himself, and he had watched the town's persecution of Kestrel with growing disgust. "This is cowards' work," Henrik shouted, his accent thick with anger. "Many men against 1 woman and baby. It's not right." His rifle cracked, and one of Blackwater's men toppled from his horse. Henrik's 3 sons added their own firepower, suddenly evening the odds. Other voices joined. The Franconsuela Martinez, the Mexican woman who ran the boarding house, emerged from behind the woodshed with an ancient shotgun. Even stuttering Timothy Breslin, the town's despised drunk, stumbled forward with a hunting rifle. "Some of us remember what it means to stand up for what's right," Consuela declared, her dark eyes flashing with defiance. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Maverick fought with the skill of a man who had survived countless gunfights, while Kestrel proved herself a natural marksman, her shots finding their targets with deadly accuracy. The unlikely alliance of town outcasts held their ground against superior numbers through sheer determination and righteous fury, but the tide turned when a stray bullet found its mark. Kestrel cried out, her rifle falling from nerveless fingers as blood bloomed across her shoulder. Maverick's roar of rage echoed across the valley as he saw her fall. "You want me?" he shouted, rising from cover with both guns blazing. "Come and take me!" His advance was terrifying to behold, a scarred angel of death walking through gunfire as if bullets were mere raindrops. 2 more of Blackwater's men fell, then 3. The silver-haired bounty hunter, clutching his wounded shoulder, tried to retreat, but found Maverick's gun barrel pressed against his throat. "You miss," Maverick said quietly, his voice more frightening than any shout. "I don't. Wait." Blackwater's voice cracked with panic. "I can pay you. Double whatever price is on your head." Maverick's scarred face showed no mercy. "Some things ain't for sale." The surviving attackers threw down their weapons, their resolve, broken by the sight of their fallen comrades and the terrifying efficiency of the man they had underestimated. As smoke cleared over the battlefield, Kestrel struggled to her feet, her wound painful but not life-threatening. "Is it over?" she asked, swaying slightly from blood loss. Maverick caught her as she stumbled, his arms strong and sure around her. "Not yet," he said, his voice gentle despite the carnage around them. "But we won this round." The wound in Kestrel's shoulder healed slowly, giving her time to truly see the man who had turned her world upside down. Maverick tended to her with the same gentle care he showed Jasper, changing bandages and preparing healing teas with hands that had dealt death only days before. The contradiction fascinated and troubled her in equal measure. "Tell me about the scars," she said one evening as he helped her into bed, Jasper sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. Maverick's good eye met hers, and she saw the old pain surface, like a wound reopening. "It was my brother," he said quietly. "Quentin. We rode together for years, but he changed after the war. Got mean. Started killing for pleasure instead of necessity." His scarred fingers traced the lines on his face unconsciously. "I tried to stop him from burning down a church with families inside. We fought with knives and he marked me good before I couldn't finish the sentence, but Kestrel understood. "You killed him to save innocent people," she said softly. "Doesn't make it hurt less. Doesn't make the nightmare stop." His voice was raw with old grief. "That's when I knew I had to change, but the reputation followed me everywhere. Till I came here, until I met you." Kestrel reached out with her good arm, her fingers tracing the scars on his face with infinite tenderness. "These don't make you a monster, Maverick. They make you a man who chose to do right, even when it cost him everything." Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, an acceptance, a love that had been growing in secret despite the chaos surrounding them. When Maverick leaned down to kiss her, it was with the reverence of a man who had found salvation in the most unlikely place. But their moment of peace was shattered by urgent knocking at the door. Henrik Volkov stood outside, his weathered face grave with worry. "They took him," the old Russian said without preamble. "Blackwater's men, they took my youngest boy, Dmitri. Said they'll trade him for you, Maverick." Kestrel felt ice form in her veins. "They're using a child as bait." "There's more," Henrik continued. "They've barricaded themselves in the church, maybe 20 men. And they've got other hostages, the school teacher, the pastor's wife, anyone who showed you kindness." Maverick was already reaching for his gun belt, but Kestrel caught his arm. "It's a trap. They want you to come charging in so they can cut you down." "I can't let innocent people suffer for my sins," Maverick said, his voice heavy with responsibility. "Then we do this smart," Kestrel said, her mind racing. "Henrik, how many men can you round up? Maybe 8, 10 if we're lucky? But Blackwater's got twice that number, and they're dug in good." Kestrel struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "Then we don't attack the church. We make them come to us." She outlined her plan quickly, a dangerous gambit that would require perfect timing and nerves of steel. It would create a diversion, draw Blackwater's forces out of their stronghold, and rescue the hostages in the confusion. It was risky, but it was better than a suicidal frontal assault. "I should be the bait," Maverick said. "They want me, not you," Stroh said firmly. "You're the only one who can make the rescue shots when the time comes. Besides," she added, with a wan smile, "they hate me almost as much as they hate you. A woman with a baby will make them careless." As they prepared for what might be their final battle, Maverick pulled her aside. "If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you," Kestrel interrupted. "I won't let it." "But if it does," he persisted, "promise me you'll take Jasper and leave this place. Find somewhere safe, somewhere you can start over." Kestrel looked into his scarred face, seeing the love and fear and desperate hope written there. "I promise," she lied, knowing she would never abandon him, knowing they would face whatever came together. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood. In the distance, the church bell tolled like a funeral knell, counting down to a confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of everyone who had dared to stand with them against the town's corruption. The rescue began. At midnight, when the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, Kestrel walked slowly toward the church, Jasper crying loudly in her arms, making herself an irresistible target. Hidden in the shadows, Maverick and their small band of allies waited for the trap to be sprung. "That's close enough." Blackwater's voice echoed from the church tower. "Where's your killer boyfriend?" "He's gone," Kestrel called back, her voice carrying perfectly in the still air. "Left town when he heard about the hostages. Said he wouldn't be responsible for innocent blood." She could hear angry muttering from inside the church. This wasn't what they had expected. Blackwater appeared in the doorway, flanked by armed men. "You're lying," he snarled. "That murdering devil wouldn't abandon you." "You don't know him at all," Kestrel said, stepping closer. "He's not the monster you think he is." "Prove it," Blackwater demanded. "Come inside. If he's really gone, you've got nothing to fear." This was the moment of greatest danger. Kestrel had to enter the church, had to get close enough to the hostages to help them when the rescue began. But first, she had to survive long enough to give the signal. Inside the church, she found the hostages tied up in the front pews. Henrik's boy Dmitri, no more than 16, the school teacher Miss Harmony, and Pastor Elijah's wife Ruth. All looked terrified but unharmed. Blackwater's men, overconfident and drunk on their apparent victory, had grown sloppy in their watch. "Now what?" Kestrel asked, still holding Jasper close. "Now we wait," Blackwater said with a cruel smile. "Wait for your devil to show his face, because he will. Men like him can't help themselves." That's when Kestrel lit the small piece of cloth. She had hidden in her sleeve the signal Maverick had been waiting for. She dropped it casually behind a pew, where it began to smolder against the dry wood. "You're right," she said calmly. "He can't help himself. But not in the way you think." The church window exploded inward as Maverick came through like an avenging angel, his guns already blazing. The surprise was complete. Half of Blackwater's men were down before they knew what hit them. At the same time, Henrik and his sons burst through the side door, while Consuela and Timothy came through the vest are in the chaos. Kestrel threw herself over the hostages, shielding them with her body, while Maverick's deadly accurate fire cut down their captors. But Blackwater, desperate and cornered, grabbed young Dmitri and pressed a gun to his head. "Stop," he screamed. "Stop, or the boy dies." Everyone froze. Maverick's guns were trained on Blackwater, but the shot was too risky with the hostage. So close. Sweat beaded on the railroad baron's forehead as he realized he was trapped. "You think you've won?" Blackwater laughed bitterly. "I've got men coming from 3 different towns. By morning, this whole valley will be crawling with hired guns. You can't fight them all." "Maybe not," Maverick said quietly, "but I can fight you." His movement was so fast it seemed impossible. The knife appeared in his hand as if by magic, flying through the air with deadly precision. It took Blackwater in the shoulder, spinning him away from Dmitri and sending his gun clattering across the floor. "It's over," Maverick said, his voice flat and final. But Blackwater, blood streaming down his arm, made one last desperate grab for his fallen weapon. "It'll never be over. Not while you're alive." The shot that ended it all came not from Maverick's gun, but from an unexpected source. Pastor Elijah stood in the doorway, his hunting rifle smoking, his face grave with the weight of what he had done. "Sometimes," the old preacher said softly, "the righteous must act with violence to protect the innocent." As Blackwater's body crumpled, the church fell silent except for Jasper's crying. The hostages were free, their tormentor was dead, and the immediate threat was ended. But as Maverick had warned, this was just the beginning of a larger war. "That need to leave," Henrik said urgently. "More men will come," like he said. But Kestrel, looking around at the faces of the people who had risked everything to help them, made a different decision. "No," she said firmly. "We've run enough. This is our home, and we're going to fight for it." The siege of Copper Ridge lasted 3 days. True to Blackwater's dying words, hired guns poured into the valley from every direction, 40 men or more, all seeking the substantial bounty that had been placed on Maverick's head. But something unexpected happened. The town began to change. Word of the church battle spread quickly. With it came a new understanding of what Maverick Kane really was. Not the cold-blooded killer of legend, but a man who had sacrificed everything to protect the innocent. When the hired guns demanded the townspeople surrender their devil, they were met with stony silence and barred doors. "We don't know no devil," old Martha Kemp told the mercenaries when they questioned her. "But we know a man who saved our children from burning to death." The transformation was remarkable. People who had spat at Kestrel's feet now brought her food and medical supplies. Men who had crossed the street to avoid Maverick now stood shoulder to shoulder with him on the barricades they had hastily erected around the town center.
Why?
Kestrel asked Dr. Mordecai Thorne, the physician who had refused to treat Jasper but now worked tirelessly to tend the wounded. "Why help us now?" The elderly doctor's hand shook as he bandaged a volunteer's arm. "'Cause I saw what real evil looks like when Blackwater held that gun to a child's head. I saw what real courage looks like when you walked into that church, knowing you might die." The final assault came at dawn on the 3rd day. The hired guns, frustrated by their inability to collect their bounty, decided to burn the entire town if necessary. But they had underestimated the resolve of people who had finally found something worth fighting for. Maverick commanded the defense from the church tower, his deadly accurate rifle picking off attackers with methodical precision. Kestrel, her wounded shoulder strapped tight, coordinated the civilian defenders with the skill of a born leader. Henrik and his sons held the north barricade, while Consuela and her boarding house girls defended the south. The battle was fierce but brief. The hired guns, expecting to face a single outlaw and his woman, instead found themselves fighting an entire community united in purpose. When their leader fell to one of Maverick's shots, the survivors broke and ran, abandoning their quest for blood money. As the smoke cleared, Kestrel found herself standing in the middle of the town square, surrounded by people who had become more than neighbors. They had become family. Maverick descended from the tower, his scarred face weary, but peaceful for the first time since she had known him. "Is it really over?" she asked, shifting Jasper to her other arm. "The bounty hunters won't be back," he said. "Word will spread about what happened here. Sometimes a town's reputation can protect it better than any fort." Pastor Elijah approached them, his expression solemn. "I've been thinking about what you said, Mrs. Hawthorne, about this being your home. I believe the Lord has a purpose for all of us here." He gestured to the crowd gathering around them. "We've learned something important these past few days. We've learned that a community is only as strong as its willingness to stand together. We've learned that sometimes the people we fear most are the ones who need our help the most." Dr. Thorne stepped forward, his medical bag in hand. "I'd like to make a formal request," he said to Maverick. "Gosh, would you consider staying on as our sheriff? The town needs a man who knows how to protect it." Maverick looked stunned. "I'm not lawman material, Doc. I've got too much blood on my hands." "Maybe," Henrik said, joining the conversation. "But you also have heart in right place. And sometimes is the most important thing." Kestrel felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the man she loved struggle with the possibility of redemption. "The choice is yours," she said softly. "But wherever you go, Jasper and I go with you." Maverick's scarred face broke into a smile, the first genuine smile she had ever seen from him. "Then I guess we're home," he said, pulling her into his arms. 6 months later, Sheriff Maverick Kane stood on the church steps, his bride beside him in a simple white dress. Baby Jasper, now walking and babbling constantly, toddled between the pews as Pastor Elijah performed the ceremony, The entire town had turned out to celebrate the wedding of the scarred cowboy and the widow who had faced their wrath hand in hand and emerged victorious. As they kissed to seal their union, Kestrel whispered in her husband's ear, "No more running?" "No more running," Maverick agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "We're home." And in the distance, the church bell tolled joyfully, calling the faithful to witness not just a wedding, but the triumph of love over fear, of unity over division, of redemption over revenge. The town of Copper Ridge had found its soul, and two broken hearts had found their way to wholeness together.